Hey y'all, new day, new verses as we continue on into Matthew 25. Today we're picking up with verses 14 through 30. Let's get into it, because as I was digging through, the things that came to my mind were Alice in Wonderland from Tim Burton and what we see. I think you'll see what I mean as we dig into it, continuing our discussion about muchness from yesterday. Here we go. Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in portion to their abilities. Then he left on his trip. The servant who received 5 talents of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 talents of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, "Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest. I have earned 5 more." The master was full of praise. "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount. Now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." The servant who had received 2 bags of silver came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more." The master said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." Then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, "Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant, and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. And I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here is your money back." But the master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it." Then he ordered, "Take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given. They will have an abundance, but from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Like I was talking a little bit about yesterday, I think it's interesting that these are 3 parables, and that the ending of this one matches up very much to the ending of the first one at the end of Matthew 24. But there's a couple things that stuck out to me. Because, like I had said earlier, we have this muchness idea, the Shema, the first servant, or first parable, thinking, the 10 bridesmaids, the heart, or the hand. And the servants here, the muchness, is, for the longest time, and admittedly it's such is the fun nature of Christendom, this parable has been used to teach a lot of different ideas allegorically. But I started thinking about the fact that, well, why money? We do all actually think in money because it's kind of how the world works. But it's not how the kingdom of heaven works. Money is backed by something. Gold, silver, what have you, at least if it's not fiat currency. And I started thinking, okay, so what if this is about way more than money? Because money, quite honestly, is droll and kind of boring. It's a tool, nothing more. It is a tool that is not only not usually used the most wisely, but that's because greed is a hell of a thing. But I don't want to talk about that. I mean, we don't need to honestly take 5 minutes to beat people over the head about the ideas of fiat currency. There is a huge discussion to be had about the ideas of faith there, and collective agreement, and putting your faith in something even though it has no value, as opposed to putting your faith in the one who does. But more than that, I started thinking about it as muchness, talents. Because it's called the talent of silver. We translate it as bags, but part of me wonders if this isn't one of those things where God is just grinning ear to ear. Because if we start looking at it as talents, as we know them in the West, not a bag, but as an actual gift or an ability, then using the muchness. Lord, you gave me this muchness. You gave me a creative mind. You gave me the ability to see joy. You gave me the ability to understand problems in a different way. And so it goes even deeper. And I started thinking about what it actually looks like to use that muchness, use that gift. Hydroelectrical engineer, fair amount of income, decently so. Somebody who happens to be one is a Christian. Yeah, you can just tithe the money, and that's well and good. And if God calls you to do that, do it. What if, though, in an example like this, it's more about, more about how you use it? What if it's instead about just throwing money at the problem? What if it's actually saying, well, I'm a hydroelectrical engineer. I know how to get running water to towns who don't have any. There are just towns that don't have any. Flint, Michigan is just one example. Why don't I use my ability to come see what the problem is? Why don't I use the gifts God has given me to try and have a solution, work toward a solution that will be for the benefit of others? Rather than just throwing a couple $100s at it because, it's the 10%, tithing on every dime and nickel, but instead of using the muchness. And as I started digging through, they use it wisely. And God, the servant or the master, comes back and says, well done, my good and faithful servant. Something that I'm fairly certain all of us want to hear from the Lord. As I started digging into the last servant, I knew you were a harsh man who harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. Well, we know that to be true as Christ followers, because we know in the Bible it's one sows, the other reaps. This is not as an example of, they're taking from them and they're screwing them. No. It's about working together, community. Somebody who knows the proper when and how to sow, and somebody who knows the proper when and how to reap. Working together, using our gifts that God gives us, the muchness God gives us, for the benefit of others. Literally walking out the Leviticus 19:18 of love God, love others. Or love your neighbor as yourself, rather. Same idea here. Because it is combining the two into one, the Shema and Leviticus. So if we're supposed to use this muchness to worship the Lord, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to go forward and pour out what we have, then suddenly it kind of changes the perspective. Because we see the servant is, at the very least trusting, because he's given an obscene amount of money to his servants, especially since a talent is 75 pounds or 34 kilos worth of silver. So you're looking at a lot of resource. So clearly he's trusting. Clearly he gives free will, or is interested in his servants having the ability to do it with their gifts and talents, because he doesn't tell them how to go make the money. He just gives it to them and says, here, do with this. And then I started thinking, okay, well, what about the third person? And the idea that Paul talks about being alive and on, or dead and off. Alive in Christ. And I started thinking, okay, well, what if that's this image here? He put it in the earth. Just because the servant was on, functional, moving around, doesn't mean he was alive. So it's an example of him buried it in the earth. His muchness has been buried. Didn't want to use it for God. He wanted to use his nature for himself. And because of it, how he perceives God changes and looks a little different. Because the first two servants, they're just glad to do it. They have gifts, they want to do more, and the master gives them more responsibilities, which, when you consider the fact that humanity is told to go forth, multiply, and cultivate the garden, meaning the whole of the playground, there's a bit of responsibility there for using of the muchness. But this servant, he's seeing cruelty. He's seeing a callous master. He's seeing a master who is, quite frankly, a jackass from the way he perceives him. But what if that very nature of the perception is part of why he didn't act? I mean, we see that I knew you were an angry man, so I buried it in the earth. Well, why do you see God that way? Why did the servant see his master that way? That's the question. But it trickles down to the idea that we have in today's time. Why would we perceive God as an asshole when he's not? And pardon the French on this one, but it's a really honest question here. Now, we have this place where so many people spend their lives thinking God is a mean kid sitting on an anthill with a magnifying glass waiting to burn people away because they're the ants getting in his way, without realizing that that's not even close to the truth of it. God is love. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever, consistent. And although it is true that the truth may piss you off when you hear it, it does set you free. And so what if it is not about the fact that we go out of our way to piss people off, but we simply live in love? We live out the example that we're called to, so that people see that God is not cruel or cold or dark or any of these things, that God is not vicious. Humans are. And we can lay down that way of doing it. We can use our muchness for the betterment of others. That's why why the Alice in Wonderland from Tim Burton popped into my mind. The entire movie is about chasing after Alice's muchness because she's lost it. Going from grim and drab and sorrowful, nearly dead, to a place of color and life. And what if it's the same thing here? What if it's a beautiful invitation that the kingdom of heaven is like those who decide to take the muchness that God has given them and truly shema, to give it back to the Lord, because the breath is borrowed anyway. We don't make ourselves. We don't animate ourselves. God does that. God is the one who breathes life into us, who uses us. So what if we start truly working in that kind of relationship? Because they don't know when the master is going to return. We don't know when our master is going to return. We only know that we are in hope, in the middle of the birth pains, in the now and the not yet, waiting for God to come back, waiting for our master to return and set things right, to see to the justice that we all desperately long for, but if we're honest, have no clue how to truly bring about. Because how many of us truly know what justice really looks like? Somebody slaps you, you push them back and down. Well, why did I get in trouble for defending myself? Because you still committed violence. We are told to turn the other cheek for a reason. It's like, well, does that mean we don't get angry at the things that are going wrong, that we just ignore it? No, righteous anger is a thing. It's how you use the righteous anger. How you use the righteous anger to respond to what's going on in the world. If you can't do anything about it physically, pray. Use the gifts God has given you to interact with people, to bring them into seeing God's good grace, so that the world stops being filled with servants, with human beings who have spent their entire life hiding the thing that makes them them in order to fit in with the world. How many people at the end of their lives say they wish they would have followed their dreams, they wish they would have held on to hope, they wish they would have held on to the beauty? What are your biggest regrets in life? Well, that I just went through the motions. Well, why? I hear this argument, it's like, well, I live in the real world. No, we're sojourners passing through. In it, not of it. And when we do what we are called to do by God, then the rest of it doesn't matter. It's literally seek first the kingdom, and all will be added. Simple, yes. Easy, not necessarily. Somewhat difficult to understand, I can imagine. Because it is a complete different way of doing it. It is saying, we're not going to play by the world's rules anymore. They're dumb rules. They're bad rules. We've got the Bible saying, put away the childish things, and here we are in this current century still behaving from elementary to junior high to high school to college to the workforce. Cliques and silly childish behavior. Well, they're not part of my group, so I'm not going to. No. Use your gifts. And the other bit of it that stuck out to me was the perception. And I know I've glanced over that a little bit. I want to dig into it for a moment. The perception of the servant. It sees his master as cold and cruel and all of these things, missing entirely that that's not the nature of his character. The other two servants, relationship. They knew what was expected of them just like we know what is expected of us. Shema, love your neighbor as yourself. We know what we're supposed to do. To love the Lord our God with all of our heart, all of our mind, all of our muchness. Our mind, our hand, our most being. This is the entire core of it that's translated into so many different words, but the beauty of it is the same. All of you, all of us, all of me is to worship the Lord. And when we're in a truly place of worship and relationship, knowing that He is the Savior, we have no need to fear. We don't have to see God as somebody out to get us. We can hold to the fact that we are blessed. Blessed to hold out hope and joy and love and peace, that God will move into every situation we put before his throne and let him handle it. Using the gifts we have, the very nature of who we are, to help build. A person who's good at making a wall, helping build that structure. A person who is good at helping move water so that people can able to drink, using that gift. A person who can help take apart different ways of looking at it and interact with it and come at it, talk about it, digging in and seeing what we can find. So what gift do you have? What is the muchness in you that helps make this world a more beautiful place? The desires that God put in your heart, not the world. So that when you have that dream of what you want to be when you grow up, you can say, God, what is my muchness so that I can be what you want me to be when I grow up? Whether I'm 50, 10, or 500. So we can hold out to hope. Hold out to the fact that God will see us through it. The servant here who just buried his money in the earth, he didn't even bother to cultivate the money, put it in the bank. He didn't bother to cultivate himself, to see who God made him to be. So the servant, in their fear, doesn't really live. And how many of us are in that place where because of fear, we refuse to truly live? Because we are afraid that God is out to get us, because we are afraid that we will fail, because we're afraid that, well, that's just not how you're supposed to do it in this world. What if we put all that fear down, since perfect love casts out all fear, and start to walk? Start to chase after what God put us in our heart. Love, joy, hope, peace, kindness, gentleness, self-control, the fruits of the Spirit that are supposed to be there in the first place when we walk with him. What if we let him cultivate in us a new creation that, yes, may look nothing like the world, but we're not supposed to look like the world, are we? We're not supposed to be the servant that's terrified to the point of, well, you're just cold, so I'm going to hide. No. The one that says, well, I've been given this, let's use it. Been given the ability to talk, let's use it. Been given the ability to see, let's use it. Been given the ability to hear, let's use it. What God has put in me, let me use. So that we're right back there, worshiping with our muchness. I mean, the word's ma'od, M-E'-O-D. It means very, or muchness. It's an adverb in Hebrew. That's why I keep coming back to the idea of muchness, because that is what it is. And we have this world that has gone out of its way to destroy the very thing that makes us unique and wonderful and beautiful as God's creation, because we want to be carbon copies, missing the fact that that is a backwards, mere way of seeing it. When the truth is we are all the same in very different ways. We are all image bearers meant to bear the image, to share his kingdom, to share his light and his life and his love. And granted, we don't always. In a place where there is darkness and anger and hate and rage, all too often we will easily and eagerly reflect the world. Well, they've given me something to hate them about, so I'm going to hate them. Why? Why would you want to be committing the same sin that Cain did? Why would you want to be Cain? So if you don't believe me, look at the Beatitudes. Look at the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus lays it out very, very succinctly. It looks very, very different. And it is something we're supposed to do. Not out of a twisted arm book of morality, religious BS. Because God is shaping us anew. Because I was one way. Now I am another. And in the middle was him. What if that's the way we're supposed to truly live? Our lives a testimony. The work of our hand changing, not because our works give us faith, but because our faith, the connection with God, the change of our character, is what instills us the need to do something different. Not out of guilt, not out of conviction. Not out of trying to force us to be something we're not, but by getting rid of the things that aren't us in the first place. Our hate, our scars, our pain, our baggage. Instead, walk. Move forward toward Him, into Him. Not burying our muchness in the earth, terrified, but instead living, walking it out so that we will hear at the end, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." I know it's a radical idea to have kindness in the place of hate. I know it sounds very odd to not repay evil with evil, but it's the very thing we're called to do. To repay evil with goodness. Not because it is deserved or earned, or because it even makes sense, but because it is the very nature of the grace we are shown. Undeserved, unearned, but poured out nonetheless by our Father in heaven, whose holy name, that must be kept holy, is there, seeing to it, moving in every need. Not necessarily the way we want it to, but again, that comes back to the expectations in us and in the servant. Well, God, I expected you to do this way. Even name it. Well, I expected the man of God to do it this way. Okay, so are you just pouting because you're pissed off because God didn't do it the way you wanted him to? I thought He was God, not you. I thought He was the one whose will was meant to be done, not our own. Because when you're in that much of a need of a miracle, you don't care how it gets there or what it looks like. You just need the miracle. And that's how God acts, when He acts, moves. When we lay it all out before Him, coming before Him, naked of the world's BS. Blanket system, blanket statements, belief system, excrement. And come to Him in humility. Knowing that we need Him to set it right. Knowing that we need Him to set us right. So that we may truly live. Don't be like the third servant. Don't hide your muchness. Don't be afraid of the Lord. Because fear of the Lord is not the same kind of cowardice behavior that we're seeing here. Fear of the Lord is more akin to a healthy respect of saying, well, you're dad, I'm not. You're God, I'm not. That's the kind of relationship we need to have. It's the very reason that the opening of the Lord's Prayer is Our Father in heaven. Our Abba, our Daddy, the one who sees us through, the one who covers us and does what a good father is meant to do. Give us room to learn and come in and protect us from the bad. That is what He does. He's given us this beautiful playground where we have a chance to grow and truly live. So let's stop burying our hands in the sand. Let's stop burying our muchness out of fear and truly live. Giving it all to Him. Unabashedly, unashamedly, unreservedly, just like He gave His life for us. Living out the beautiful love we are shown and chasing after the one who gives us life. Because with Him, we'll make it. Without Him, we're dead to begin with. So what will you do? Will you live as the servant who buried his talent in the earth? Afraid of his master? Or will you say, God gave it to me, I'm going to use it. God gave me the talent, I'm going to use it. God gave me the resource, I'm going to use it. God gave me the breath, I'm going to give it back. In prayer, in praise, in hope, and in trust. Because He's God, we're not. And really all we have to do is trust Him enough to be it. And let go of our own stuff long enough to see Him. I look forward as we continue on into discussions from 31 into the end of the chapter of 46 with the final judgment, where we see that it is a place of needing to live out what God calls us to do. very idea of bringing a shovel, meaning that we're the shovel. I'll see you guys then. May his favor be upon you. Know that you are loved, and don't give up hope. Because he'll see you through. Just kind of let him be God. I'll see you then.